Hello, Arnd. Welcome to the Transformational Learning Summit.
Hey Lawrence, good to see you.
Thank you so much for making time for this conversation. I've been really touched by your work with filmmaking and with youth, and I'm excited to see what emerges in this space between us today. Um, I'd love to start with this question of what does transformation mean to you?
There's something very exciting for me about it, which is about coming alive. Um, Anytime when thinking of a river, the moment a river is stuck in its way, it's not very healthy, and there is a lot of aliveness in the process of change, in the process of transforming. But in our human experience, I do think I'm very aware it's also can be quite a painful process as well.
Hmm.
And so there's when it comes for me to transformational processes, there's something that is a combination of the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to risk, openness, vulnerability, authenticity with each other, and the openness to learn from that process and in process become more who we are. So for me, it's a very, very personal term, transformation, that and that is so needed at this time for in the middle of the multiple intersecting global crises we are in.
Hmm. Yeah. How does how did you come to the work that you're doing now? This because you're doing very transformational work with youth around the world. I think you've had quite a scale with the impact you've had. What led you to doing this kind of work?
To make I feel it's my life story, but to make a longer story, my life story, my biography, to make it brief, is I to show the contrast. As in, I grew up right next to the Berlin Wall, and experienced what it's like not to be able to move across borders.
Mm.
And
Mm.
when I was able to travel, I realized I was really changing on a very personal level, as in to see to see the world from another person's, another context, another culture's perspective makes one realize one's own view and one's own perspectives and one's own limitations, but also one's own strength. And so that was always there was what was moving me for years. And then I was based in London at the time when September 11 happened, and it made me very concerned about our world situation, but also very inspired to travel back to Muslim countries. And when I was in Morocco, I got just very strongly the urge to create um, people-to-people diplomacy programs, as in to bring youth from the United States universities together with youth in Morocco, because I felt there's so good people on the different sides, and what's needed is to bring people together. It actually reminds me of a situation when I was traveling in Morocco, and it was just in the build up to the war in Iraq. And I
Mm.
remember I was sitting on the train, and when you're on the train in Morocco, everything becomes really, really social. And somebody was offering me, oh, here's tea, and do you want some tea? And here's some pastry for my grandma. And then in the midst of that, somebody asked, that person asked me, so how is it in Europe? Do people hate Muslims?
Mm.
I
Wow.
remember at the time that question hit me right at the core of my being, and
Mm.
I was responding, after 9/11, I don't think people hate Muslims, the majority of people, but a lot of people are now afraid of Muslim, and what's needed is this, as in
Mm.
meeting people face to face, being in conversation, changing our views in the process, or widening our views in the process.
Mm. First, I really resonate with that because I have these memories of I also spent 3, 4 years in Morocco as a kid, and I have these memories of taking the train from Rabat to Tangier. And actually, my most specific memories were Ramadan, where I'd be on the train, and all of a sudden, the sun would set and everyone would start smoking and eating, and it was like, so I have this like Moroccan train memory, but I'm so touched by what you're sharing and fascinated about the process that you went from this inspiration that you want to create this program to
Mm.
actually doing it. And I'm curious because this is something we talk about all the time. We have people that have a vision and they want to, work with like, women's youth empowerment, or they want to, lead a change project in some, with some group of people. And then there's the reality of kind of taking the first step into something that you're maybe not so familiar with. So I don't know if at that point you already had a lot of experience creating a program for, kids and some with this intention of bridging cultures. But I wonder what was that process for you to kind of take this inspiration that you had and actually create the first version of that program?
It's For me, it was a life calling, like a real sense of that. As in a real, I was before in the years before. For me, this process of becoming myself was extremely accelerated by moving abroad and going to Australia or going to, as I said, to Morocco or to other countries and experiencing myself in different contexts and realizing I can look at the world with a very different view and can learn different capacities within me. So that passion for personal transformation through the lens of intercultural learning and through the lens of meeting people that are different than me was kind of, I think, my core internal engine for transformation. And when it then came to and in that process, I was the whole time, where's my task? I was in my late 20s, early 30s. So where is my task in life? As in, where can I really make a contribution?
Hmm.
And post 9/11, being in Morocco gave me that lens. And then the process, it was about a 1.5 year process until I facilitated the first program. And in that process, of course, becoming aware of, getting some consultancy as well, asking good people who've done it before, as in, how did you do it? And learning about where are my strengths and where do I need to learn new skills, and do I have the guts? Will I commit to this? And I didn't know how much would be involved. I'm not sure if I would. I probably lost hope, but that it would take a while. But if you have this, if there's a purpose that's larger than your current situation, it can pull you through. And that's how I experienced it. That 1.5 years, then learning about online stuff, learning how to build your website, getting the right people involved. How do you get the budget for it? How do you and a lot of labor of love. There's a lot of work that is not paid, and but then creates incredible rewarding experiences by feeling a sense of purpose and a sense of direction. And from the first, but that was only getting to the first program. From the first program to then really 4 years later having up to 1,000 participants going, always in small groups of 12, with returned Peace Corps volunteers as program leaders, to create that to have a team of running programs in a very transformative small group context setting. Was exhausting, was exciting, was amazing to do that. And I guess a way in at the beginning was finding the right network. As in, I was looking for what US universities are running programs in Spain, and what systems, what organizations would I approach in order to reach the directors to offer these programs, and what's a format that is really inspiring students to get there. So these are some of the
Mm,
steps.
mm, mm. And these were in-person
Yeah.
cohorts, all in person at that time. This was what, roughly like 2005 to 2009? Like what time period are we talking about?
Yeah, I was in Morocco 2003. I started the programs 2004. Mm.
Mhm. Cool.
Yeah.
And when did filmmaking become a part of that? Was it right from the beginning or did that emerge?
It's really funny. I don't know how you experience, uh, being immersed in a task and then experiencing a sense of vision, not in the sense of something airy out there, but in the sense of I'm in an experience and I can sense that this could be could reach more. This
Hmm.
could have a wider impact. This is transformative in the personal, but how do I now translate that into experiences that's for the hundreds or for the thousands? And it was right from the beginning when I experienced, I think it was on my very first facilitated program. When I was facilitating the program, I felt I need to learn about filmmaking. I need to find filmmakers because I was very aware, I became more and more aware that I'm serving lovely people, lovely students, but very privileged students who have the money to be abroad and who can travel. And they are really important to reach. But I was then always feeling like, how do I bring this incredible transformative learning experience on campuses that are very diverse already, often 100 languages spoken on a US campus, while at the same time very often where students are then in their bubbles in the groups very naturally it happens to all of us in the groups where they feel comfortable, and so by that the crossing between the bubbles doesn't happen. And that's where I was really sitting with the question, how do I translate these transformative learning experiences into films that then can come to campuses to support this kind of interaction on a campus as well.
That's so amazing that so you came into that without a background in film. You were inspired, say, around 2003, 4 to then become a filmmaker.
Absolutely. It was actually like for the first film, I was searching for the film director. I was looking for the team and so on. I was seeing myself much more as a producer. And I remember, I think it was with and then being also, I don't know if luck is the right word, but meeting the right people at the right time. There are these synchronicities
Think
when
synchronicity.
when you follow your dream, and then meeting people from New York Film Academy and meeting people from National Geographic Education. And I remember somebody from National Geographic Education being very direct with me and saying, Arnd, this is your vision. The film, what you're describing, the transformative learning, the way of people opening up with each other, and this is your vision. You need to be the director because if you give that vision away, it will become something totally different. You
Mm,
need the advice was you need a team who knows how to make film, and you need to learn a lot, and you need to listen a lot to producer and others on the team, but you need to be the director. And I'm like, really? Me? What? And but that's how it started.
mm. I want to go back for a moment just to talking to one of the things you just shared about what enabled you to be successful early on, which was these partnerships with different networks, and specifically these universities. I would imagine that people approach leadership at universities all the time. What do you think it was about your approach or the way that you communicated about what you were trying to do that enabled you to be successful in actually building those partnerships?
It's a good question. I would say it's there are different aspects that come to mind. One is I feel is about heart. Like if you feel really passionate about something, it will come through. That's one. Then it was a time of, um, in 2003, before the invasion of Iraq, the level of tensity on in the
Mm,
media was so strong that the programs with their heartfelt human to human connection was such a contrast to that, in its message already, but also in its feelings, that those people who were ready for it really were looking for that as an experience for their students. And so that I think there's a hard element, which then creates that, of course, I will not be able to reach everyone, but I will reach those directors who with whom that message resonates. So it creates it. and and at the time, it was under the Bush administration. It was for most universities. I think it was not they couldn't send students to Morocco due to liability reasons for their insurances.
Hmm.
Even though the crime rate was in Spain probably 5 times higher than in Morocco, but it wasn't possible to send due to the perception of terrorism in the public media, which
Mm.
created an incredible lens of awareness lens when you actually went, when students went and felt safe and felt home in a homestay family and be in conversation. It was just an additional lens of transformation. Just one more element on answering as a response to your question. I think now the difference is offering media as an offering film, where within film, within media, you can go within a minute, within a 1.5 minutes to the heart and to quite strong, very emotional, very personal messages that can go very direct. So I
Mm.
think right now reaching networks and reaching the right people comes through the lens of media and film work.
So I think one of the things that makes your work really unique is the way that you've really integrated filmmaking into transformative education in one way or another. And I'd love to expand that on that a little bit. And maybe just at a top level, what are some of the key insights that you've had around working with film and education? And what do you think what is it that makes it so powerful?
It's a really good question. So I'm sitting with it a bit. Um, when I feel into it at its essence level, like what we are looking for when we go into a learning experience is that we are somehow moved, we are somehow touched by something. And that then makes us curious. And in the curiosity, we open up our mind to some new information. And in that process, we might realize, oh, I'm actually not as open as I thought I would be. And suddenly it becomes an internal relationship and an external relationship. I feel that film, if film doesn't do that, then it's not doing its work. Of like with film, you need to, like with documentary film for sure, you need to listen harder than you play. You need to spend so many hours really listening to what's happening and identifying the essence level of it
Mm,
and weave it together into a story of meaning. And I do feel that at this time, people are longing for meaning, and meaning very often comes through the lens of feelings. And in the educational field, we often go very directly through the cognitive and through the thinking and through a lot of words, while our what we are actually looking for as well in a learning experience is the heart to heart, the connecting to our values, the being challenged in our way of feeling into something or thinking about something, and the direct path to that, or the more direct path to that, are feelings. And I don't mean now just let's be just a bit emotional, reality TV show, big emotions. I mean it more in the sense of when are the moments we really pay attention? When are the moments we really are present for somebody else? And that presence for somebody else creates feelings. And
mm,
if I feel validated and listened to, I'm in a totally different place of learning.
mm. But in this context, you're talking about, I think the other side of that is like when you feel validated and listened to, and also when you feel somebody who's sharing from a place of deep authenticity and vulnerability. And that's something I've noticed in the clips that I've seen from your work is that you kind of there's uh, I mean part of what makes it powerful I think similar to a really moving Zoom call is that on a Zoom call you're not just listening to the instructor deliver you content in a good well designed Zoom space. people have an opportunity to share, and you have an opportunity to hear from someone from their space of deep authenticity, and so they feel witnessed and heard, and yet you also get to receive something there. And I feel like that's something that you've really distilled with many of the clips that I've seen, where you have people from different cultures sharing from a place of deep authenticity, and it's very moving.
Yeah, and I mean that's where I see the the magic of learning about filmmaking comes from listening to many, many conversations that are recorded and realizing if there's a group of 8, each one of the individuals has at some moment reaching their moment of insight. And
Mm,
their moment of insight that's really important for the group. But each one is reaching that moment of insight, probably at a different timing, and each has a longer or shorter path to get there. So if somebody is more introverted, the pathway to reaching their insight will be very different to somebody who is more extroverted, who talks, and then gets there. And the power of filmmaking I see as being an attentive listener, validating the different voices and different personalities, and bringing out that gold that is there in the group, that is naturally in them anyway, and bring it into a format that is accessible then for entire groups to be moved by it. Because the difficulty of our time is there's an explosion of knowledge, explosion of media, explosion of so much content that we can't keep up with the many, many, many stories. And most of us, including myself, we need to tell a bit our story until we reach the inside. And I think that the power of media is um, time travel, helping the insights to be more visible and to make them visible in a diverse group, um, that each one holds a different place of insight.
mm. So I want to open that up a little bit because it sounds really, really interesting. First, I really appreciate this insight that, let's say in a working group of 8 people in some sort of process, that each person might reach their moment of discovery at their own time. It's not necessarily something that happens simultaneously for everyone. I mean, it can be wonderful if that does some spontaneous awakening, collective awakening. But in my experience, and I really love that you're articulating this, because when I look back on any group experience where I've been particularly a participant, one of the things that makes it so rich is it's almost like popcorn, that somebody will have that moment and they'll share something, and then that becomes the seed for someone else's insight, and then it just kind of pops around the room in some way, and then somehow by the end, sometimes the last person has their insight 2 hours after the experience is over. It just comes together. So there's something really noteworthy about what you're pointing at, and what I want to clarify is, on one level, what I'm hearing you say is that as a filmmaker, you can, if that process is recorded, you can somehow choreograph the distillation or sharing of that. But I'm also curious about what you're saying as the implication for the participant on the receiving end of the media experience that you're putting together.
In what way for the participant?
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand, because this is where I'm trying to understand the significance of what you just pointed at, as far as the different timelines of insight, and
Yeah.
and the distinction, and maybe I didn't quite understand what you're saying, but there's, on one side is for you creating the media, and on the other side is for you creating the experience with the media, and so what is the relevance of those time what is the relevance of that timeline aspect on both sides?
I think it is really, really significant because um, it brings it to the place that yeah, learning happens, at different speeds for us, but also in different styles for us. And it's then the question, how in a diverse group of, for example, 8, how do we create the space in the center that can allow that the different voices are heard. If somebody has a great insight but takes off on a tangent for 20 minutes in a certain direction and there are different cultures present, probably not everyone. Some of will really follow and be right out there, on the plains and riding the horse with the person in the direction they're going, and it might lose others. And and that's probably natural for a conversation to happen in a group. But then in a group, if we do that wisely, there would be a sense of facilitation and bringing it back to others and others' way of finding their insight. And I do feel that filmmaking can help with that role of
Hmm.
facilitation in a group. That's one that comes up. It also, for me, empowers the more introverted voices who need time to reflect, arrive at their insight, and then have the invitation to bring it into the room. So filmmaking is a very, very, or that form of listening. Your voice is as important as any other voice right here. So it creates that equality. Um, and there is another element, which is it's not just that we are as a group, if there are eight, that we are all different, of course, but internally, our inner dialogue um, has different nuances. Like there might be a moment if I'm in a conversation where only the positive is mentioned, there's something in me from the place of authenticity naturally, not just in me, like in us as humans, something will rise. It's like, yes, but have we already mentioned this and have we looked at that? It's very natural, it comes up. But if I would be in the role and everybody is saying just something critical, within me there might be the balance rising. Actually, we also need to appreciate what we already have, what's already present here in the group, and there's insight right here, and isn't it wonderful we can be so expressive with each other. So what I'm trying to say is that our internal voice and what we need to bring into the group will be different depending on the journey of the group. um, and again, that's where I feel the a caring uh, um, observer, a caring listener with media and with editing can help that, can
Hmm.
facilitate.
Hmm. Can maybe it would be helpful to also have a little example. I know you wanted to share a little video clip, but maybe it'd be helpful to demonstrate a little bit of what you're pointing at here. And I want to open it up for you to introduce it as you want. Maybe explain a little bit of the context and how it works, and share your clip if that works.
Sure, yeah. So is it all right? I would love to share just for 40 seconds kind of our values, our mission that brings it
Right.
into the room, and then a 2-minute clip that brings very diverse voices into the room of participants. And just by putting their voices right next to each other, creates this element of having a sense for a group with very different skills and very different hearts and different minds, and that there's still a sense of community.
Great. So, and I'll remove myself from the spotlight so you have the full screen to share.
Okay, so let's see. Am I able to share screen?
You should be able to, yeah.
Yeah, I think I should be. So I'm gonna need your help to make sure I'm doing this right here. I'm gonna share screen. Do you see the black screen?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, so that's just for 40 seconds to introduce our mission. So this is an intro that is then sitting before a video piece. And it does bring quality into the room and shows the power of film and the power of emotion and the power of values. And at the same time, then we link it with something like this that I bring up now, where it's not about being polished. It's not about the participants having the perfect voice or the the biggest insight. It's about interweaving insights of a group. And so this is now about ordinary participants on Zoom sharing their thoughts, and it's woven together into a story that it brings community building skills into the room. So I'm going to just bring that up now. Let's see if this is already the right. Yeah. I'm dyslexic, so I always need some time to find the right button. Here we are. Can you see the black screen?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What I like about the Crossing Borders community the most, I think, is the feel of being heard without being judged is very freeing.
I like how we are able to have like such a diverse groups of people, and at the end of the day, I kind of feel like we can be very different, but we can be very similar.
I'm opening up to more perspectives now, and just to talk to people that have different views on different topics and just the world itself, you know.
The most important thing for me is definitely the connectedness and the sense of the meaningful conversations you have, and you encounter different perspectives, and it challenges you and it challenges the other person to think.
Especially now during COVID, to be able to like have intimate and authentic relationships from people all over the world just feels like a beautiful way to create a really global community.
Crossing Borders community, they are sincerely interested in just discussing things and helping you.
Share, these really profound stories from our own life, stories of overcoming, stories of facing mental health challenges, of life difficulties.
It's the power to experience emotions and have feelings for the other person, especially the feelings of love and compassion and empathy.
I'm really grateful to have been with you all and trust in the process. I know there's magic when we all share our stories.
And it also gives like a very forgiving place to practice dialogue skills, because we're not necessarily born with them, and I feel like it's forgiving. You can have your faux pas and make mistakes.
Crossing Borders community is a very safe environment, and that we are doing our best to try to support each other in this, and that is beautiful.
So that just is a bit of an impression.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful, and I love also just what comes through in the sharing of the people that you've highlighted. I'm curious how the process is implemented. Do people watch clips like that together on a Zoom call? Do they watch them independently in some sort of online space and then have a chat about it? So what is the actual structure of how something like this works in terms of how you integrate the media and build the dialogue?
So a piece like this can be used like a trailer, and then also on social media where then participants get a sense of, oh, these are people like you and me, or some of the values really resonate with me, and yes, these are skills actually that I want to practice. And so it's an informal invitation, but it's not just one person sitting saying something. It's a group energy that invites. In doing the workshops, we use then this kind of media in order to bring the prompts into the middle. So if there's an activity, I'm gonna start somewhere else and come back, but to the media. If we think of, if we want to create a conversation within a group, within a small group, or even if we are face to face, if we are 10, 20 people within a group, very often if the aim is that there is a deep dialogue within that group, it very often comes to this moment where is there one person in the room, even if it's face to face, who will take the risk to make themselves vulnerable and to open up and to drop deeper and to go authentic. And the moment one person does it, the group has a choice. People in the group have a choice of, do we follow that depth? Do we continue with that depth? And then suddenly the group can be helped to drop to a deeper level. In our processes, the videos do that, fulfill that function, because the people who are recorded are in small groups of 4 to 6 people. They had time of many sessions, 4 to 6 sessions, to get to know each other, build trust. So they enter an activity on that level of trust, and they share with each other on that level, and they share in order to serve a group to go deeper. So we experience the video clips as a real powerful agent to help a group to enter dialogue with each other.
So the video clip is like the first person sharing who's opening up that space of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There can be one part of the role. Another part of the role can be right at the beginning, can be a micro moment of, what are our dialogue agreements, and to bring them into the room and into the space in a dynamic way, where the group then goes into a small group, and in their small groups, the group decide or agrees on the dialogue agreements, on the values. So sometimes it's a micro teaching moment. And for the moment of when it comes to sharing in small groups and opening up with each other, then the videos have this function of modeling deep sharing.
And is this the kind of thing where you'll start with a big group and then break out into smaller groups, and somewhere in that process, will everybody in the big group watch the clip and then break out, or will they go out and break out and then watch the clips in the small group?
It's usually we like, when it comes to group flow, we need on one side the clarity of structure of what's happening when, to help a group to in the flow. On the other side, it needs the freedom and the flexibility of really following the emotion in the small group. And we experience that going several times into small groups and bringing them back into the large group to a piece of media is a really beautiful way of hitting both targets, of having a riverbed that's has a very clear holding, while at the same time, and clear structure behind it, while not feeling imposing. And at the same time, then the flexibility of the group to be the water and to, around these prompts, to really engage with each other and be real and be authentic with each other around it.
Mm. And you, of course, have the benefit of being now a professional filmmaker, which, I think it goes without saying that producing a good quality piece of media requires a lot of potential resources and expertise. I wonder, what are your reflections on, first, what makes maybe if you have any reflections on what makes a piece of media good or appropriate in this context, and what a person who isn't a filmmaker might consider as far as how they might approach weaving media into a learning experience.
Yeah. It's a very complex question because on one side, media can be very, very rough and can be extremely soulful and extremely powerful. So it's not about a status of it has to be a Sundance quality in order to do anything. It's not about that. It's about the soulfulness and the emotionality and the realness of the pieces. Sometimes we watch Hollywood movies, and they, in their multi-million-dollar production, weave in elements that are shaky as if they're from a mobile phone recorded, because it creates this directness of experience, right? This directness of emotionality. So it's not about perfectionism, but the editing process or the curation of the media is really important. And I think that during lockdown and during the pandemic, a lot of students got really burned as well by really bad media that is then there en masse. So and that is, if it's too much and everybody sends a clip, it just is then exhausting, and it doesn't have the curation yet. And it, if it's very repetitive, it's not already so far. It doesn't land. So I don't want to sound too negative, but I want to. That's where I would say it is good to work with people, with organizations who work with content like that, and there are student film festivals that are curated by some some film institutes, or there is the Global Oneness Project that is producing incredible media that is out there and that can be used. It's almost more learning to see it, or the curation of the selection of the right media and weaving it into the process. Maybe one last thought on that is it depends so much on target group, because if we work with the Charter for Compassion, and that's civic, that's interlinking, it's a network of very different civic organizations, they're going to need very, very different media and going to respond emotionally to very different media than students who are used to 1 to 2 minute clips that need to be quite dynamic. So also there is like, I guess I want to bring it down to something very basic, very simple. I know I'm making it a bit more sound very complicated, but if I bring it down to something very basic and simple, it's like, if I'm in a conversation with a person who I care about, I'm gonna tune into, oh, what message and what style of message, what tone of message will resonate with you. And I feel we need the same approach as well with media. And it's really good to remember what we know and what we don't know. So if we don't know that field so much, it's possible to learn, but then it's good to have friends who have some experience in it, or some other organizations.
And I love the point you made earlier about that it doesn't have to be super polished. I think there's also, when you were mentioning the Hollywood example, I wanted to add to that, there's so many mega $1 million budget movies that it just feels so emotionally flat because it's all special effects and polished, but doesn't have that authentic human sense to it. And I know from the other thing I wanted to add is just from our experience of recording testimonials. It can for us, like as simple as just recording over Zoom, but really capturing that moment of peak experience, right after a Zoom process or right after the program's over, to catch them at the moment when it's real for them, and that realness really comes through in the video. So yeah, I think there are ways that you can like without having a lot of experience still capture the emotion, because that's what people are. You said in the beginning that it takes one person to share from a vulnerable and authentic place, and that touches people so deeply.
Absolutely. I mean, you just identified a core element, which is, help people who are not actors or professionals, but real people after a real experience they had in a transformative program of yours, and to capture them in the moment when they're in the feeling. So that's key. And at the same time, to be aware, what's the visual? If I'm down here and I'm saying something very personal, emotional, it will not resonate with you so much. Or is the sound good enough? Sound is a key element of transporting the message. And so sometimes, some participants might actually be best recording themselves on their smartphone, and then it creates a very immediate emotional message.
It's funny, and just as you did that and you went into the corner, your sound actually got worse. So the whole experience kind of like got like noticeably worse. I want to bring it back a little bit to to the kind of meta context of designing a dialogical experience. So much of what I'm gathering from your work is about this cultural exchange between people, which I'm assuming part of it is the way the content, the media catalyzes a particular kind of exchange between people that then delivers on this function of cultural exchange. And so I'm curious to hear a little bit about how you think about that, or what you've learned about designing an experience that creates a dialogue between participants that delivers on this function, that something somewhere is transformed, or somehow there's been a meaningful exchange of culture between participants that actually goes on to live inside them after the experience.
Yeah. It's funny, but when I hear you, the first thing that actually resonates with me is this Carl Rogers quote. I might, quote it not entirely correct, but where he says that what is most personal is most universal. So for me, when it comes to what are we longing for at this time, not just at this time, but as human beings, what are we longing for? We're longing for connection. In trauma work, Bessel van der Kolk says, let's remember 70% of us going to get stronger through adversity if we have two things. One is deep social connection, and another is a sense of purpose. And so when I bring it back to culture exchange, sometimes we go too fast to, oh, it's so exciting. What are our cultural differences? And how do you do that over there? And how do you do it? We're already putting the lens more strongly on the differences, which are very exciting, which are really needed, and which are part of the story and of the learning process. But that might not be the starting point, and that might also not be the main objective. The main objective might be, or that's how I experience it, is deep connection between people of very different backgrounds. And that's an art, as an art of supporting us to enter a process where we dialogue with each other. And that comes back to agreeing on values right from the beginning in order to have a base and create a space where one can be brave, and that brave space needs to have some elements of safety in order to be brave. And so when it comes for me, and also another element that resonates with me when it comes to cultural exchange is, I often don't call it anymore intercultural dialogue. I call it more dialogue across difference, because that difference can be very strong within our own culture. And it can be so beneficial and so rewarding, so powerful to realize, oh, wow, you in your world, even though we live in the same country, are from the same cultural background, have very different experiences. And that can be socioeconomic, or it can be between gender, or it can be, there are so many differences we can live. And I feel at this time, that's where a lot of learning needs to happen for us, how to be with difference. And another element why we start more with dialogue, empathic dialogue at the beginning, is that in an intercultural dialogue, we experienced it as well during the pandemic, in a dialogue between different cultures. It was very bonding to actually go through the lens of resilience and stories of overcoming, as in to look at how do we create the safe space to share where we struggle at this time. And through the lens of humanity and through struggle, of course, we're also going to share about our differences. We might be, there was a lot of saying during the pandemic, we might be in the same storm, but we're in very different boats. And what is the difference of privilege, difference of cultural settings, difference of context, opportunity is really important to learn about, but it's a very different process to learn about it when we are emotionally connected as human beings and we feel deeply connected to each other. Last thing I say to that is, we had students of historically marginalized background saying to us, it was so relieving to go first straight to personal topics of overcoming and where everyone struggles, rather than going straight away to cultural identity and difference. And yeah, for groups that are historically marginalized, it's quite an empowering experience as well to be one off rather than already identifying the difference.
Can you give me like an example of what that looks like of what that has looked like in a specific group, you know, where you have a group of people and you want to create a conversation about overcoming adversity. So you create the agreements and then you share a story, you show a clip. Like how does that initial phase of the conversation get built up to where people are opening up in a deeper way?
So the entry point, so if there's a session that aims for that, creating deeper connection around stories of overcoming, and people go into 3 small groups, and number one, it's really important that the people go into the same small groups so they start having a story. It's not about constantly having new people, it's about continuing to build a story and build trust with the people in their small groups. And the first one, the natural, you know, the icebreaker is in who are you, you know, a short brief way of introduction. Then the second, video media that introduces the values, the dialogue agreements, and then in a small group, what are we agreeing to as a small group? Confidentiality, respect, you know, the values of empathy, looking out for each other. And then the group is ready for some heat and some to raise the bar and to go to the places where then there's and that's where media comes, we bring into the middle, and that can be very a poet. We use there, for example, a poet who is on a TED stage who talks very directly and very strongly about bullying and being bullied, and it's such a powerful way of bringing it into the room that people really identify with his struggle, and then the invitation of exploring our own struggle. There's often, between media and going into small groups, we always build a written reflection into and even if it's 2 minutes, so that we help a bit the group of people who are more extroverted or more introverted to have a moment to pause and land into 1, 2 thoughts they had. Really, what resonated with you in this media piece emotionally, what thoughts come up for your story. And so before a small group, there's a clarity of you have something in your hands already to go with into your small group.
And that written piece is shared in the Zoom chat, or just private for their own journaling?
It's private as a written reflection. The way I see it is when going into small groups, it's natural that we're going to be different, as in not just culturally, but also in personality. And very often that the written reflection and the invitation of let's share equal airtime and a commitment as a group to that creates that the written reflection creates that the more extroverts are invited to pause for a moment and to not go straight away with the thought and words that are already present, but to drop a bit deeper and allow space to drop into feelings and to become aware of the group and the needs of the rest of the group. While the introverts have a bit more time to land into their feeling and have something present with them that they have in their hand that they're going to be invited to share. So everybody is not sharing a written text, but everybody has something for them, so that the sharing in the small group is a little bit prepared, a little bit landed, and a little bit more on an equal footing.
How do you think about measurement? What do you measure outcomes in some way?
Yeah, we work with Purdue University, the Center for Intercultural Learning, mentorship, assessment, and research. So for them, assessment is really important, and it's also we experience it as so. We created a assessment tool with them for our group processes. We also work a lot with character strengths, so that's where the VIA Institute on Character is really important with their free survey. A really powerful tool. Also,
what's that called again? The survey?
VIA, VIA. Institute on Character. It's a one of the most comprehensive, widely used free survey on character strength. And it helps you to identify some of your signature strength. And we use that, for example. And we find assessment really very helpful if it's built in as a reflection and if it's built into the awareness process and the learning process for the participants. It's really powerful and important, because very often for us who are facilitating, it's very difficult to see what's really happening within people, what's happening within them, and then it gives people also another mirror, another way of looking what's happening within me and what's my process, and something to look back on. And it also shows an impact and the transformation that actually happens through the processes.
So as we wrap up here, I'm curious, any reflections you might have on the difference between working with youth and adults?
Tell me a little bit, just for a minute, your background of the question, as in what resonates within you when you ask that question. I'm just
mostly for me, because all of my work has been with adults, and so it's I've been connecting with people recently who are in the world of working with youth. And I mean, I guess it's just interesting for me. The older I get, the more distance I have to kids, and so, or to being like at that age of like late teens or something like that. So I'm curious for you, who's someone who's been very situated in the world of youth development. And also, I think just because looking back, I really wish that I had this kind of resourcing when I was a kid. I think that would have made an enormous difference. It wasn't until my early 30s that I really came in contact with awareness and self-awareness. And so for me, when I encounter kids that are going through this kind of process at such a young age, it's just mind-blowing. And I encounter the level of maturity and insight and self-awareness, and I'm just so deeply touched. So I'm curious about, and I don't actually, I'm not sure how much experience you've had with adult development, but I'm curious if there's anything that stands out for you there as a difference.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I love it. We work with adults as well. We work with private sector, with Cisco is one of our key partners, and the Cisco Networking Academy there as well, working with their leadership. And as I mentioned, Charter for Compassion and other organizations. So we work as well with adults. We're not cutting out, the adults, but you made it very personal in your response. I'm going to make it very personal why I feel so drawn to serving youth at this time. It's like there's a very personal reason in my own story that I never, in growing up, I had a father who was not able to emotionally father us. I have one brother. So that capacity of stepping behind you in processes that are really, that create fears and create insecurity in stepping into life. And I think there was always this longing, for this warm hand on the back and the confirmation of, you can do this, and this is scary, and I'm going to be here. And you do this, and I'm going to be here. And I feel there is a sense of deep concern for our youth, for those who are now becoming at a time where we have global crises that destabilize us, when we have work and relationships and some form of direction in our life. It destabilizes us, and there to think of youth and to see the numbers of how affected our youth is at this time is really painful to watch, and very concerned there for youth. That's the sad side. On the powerful side is, for me, from trauma research, Bessel van der Kolk, as I mentioned earlier, 70% gonna grow stronger through adversity if we have deep social connection and a sense of purpose. And that's where I experience youth, exactly what you describe. If there's a bit of support to create processes where youth can step into a process of becoming themselves and doing that in a peer community, the access to their inner wisdom and their inner insight is just so powerful, so beautiful, and also so needed for our time, for a time where there's so much despair around us. And there, to put it now into a contrast to adults, that process of entering deeper transformative inner becoming yourself processes is more difficult for us as adults, because we have certain strengths put in place, but with those strengths very often come also certain protective mechanisms that not allow us necessarily to go and transform, and become ourselves. So and I didn't mean to say that. Of course, people are on their journey of becoming themselves, but I think there's more, there are more protective processes already in place. So it takes, it's more difficult to, I think, for a group of adults to enter a process openly with curiosity, as for youth. And I say that now not so much to put down adults, I say it more to highlight the beauty of youth and the potential for youth if they have some support.
Arnd, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insight today, and just your amazing journey. I have so much respect for the work you do, and just inspired by the journey of starting with this inspiration and then building it to something that has had impact to thousands of people. So yeah, thank you for making time today.
Thank you so much also for the way you were holding the conversation. You were present. I could really feel your sense of being there, and of your curiosity, your care. So thanks for having me.